I guess if I go back, like I used to think it was very selfish. I was like, if anybody that I know committed suicide, I would say, use that word, I would never go to their funeral. That was something I said for a really long time, not understanding anything about it. And I mean, I just didn't understand it. Like, I thought it was so selfish. And I was like, why would you do that to people around you? Like, why would you even consider that? And then as I've gone along on this journey, what I have learned the most is that suicide is not selfish. It's actually the complete opposite. They are thinking that they're helping everybody around them by basically taking themselves out of that situation.
I am so excited, Kelli, to have you. Can you start by introducing yourself and your not-for-profit and what you're trying to do?
Absolutely. My nonprofit is BCC Evolution. It's a mental health and suicide awareness nonprofit. We fit more in the pre-crisis. So really teaching people the skills, the information, having those resources to help people that might struggle with mental health, substance use, or suicide ideations. Well, ideations, you know, the words. But because I wasn't educated, I lost my middle sister to a completed suicide in 2017.
Whew, you're just going to dive right in.
That's what I do.
So
yes.
I mean, let's back up. How old were you when your sister completed suicide?
It's a really great question. So it was 2017. It's coming up actually 7 years next week on the 20th, February 20th. So, I'm like, how old am I now? I was 37, 36.
And how old was she?
She was actually 43. So I'm the same age that she was when she passed.
And coming up on an anniversary. So this might be an emotional year.
Yeah. Last summer I turned 43 and I was just like, it was like interesting just because, and I don't know, the emotions like started coming up a little bit and I was like, wow, it's kind of interesting to think about, like, I'm the age that she was when she passed. So yeah, it's definitely, February 20th, 2017 was when she passed. So
tell us a little bit about her, like from a positive perspective, like things that you remember about her, the things that you loved about her, your relationship with her.
Yeah, so she was actually my middle sister on my mom's side. So my dad had two, my mom had two, and then they had me. And she was my middle sister on my mom's side and actually the sister that I grew up with the most. So she was pretty much the only one in the house by the time, because she was 7 years older than me. And by the time I grew up, she was really the only one that was left in the house of my sisters. And so she was that one person that I literally went to for everything. And I joke now because I used to ask her advice with cooking and I used to burn everything. So I always joke that my husband probably wishes she was still alive. But I'm getting better. I'm better at cooking now. I don't burn everything. So, but yeah, she was definitely, I mean, I constantly went to her for all the things, right? She always had that perfect answer. I don't know how she always had those answers, but she was a caregiver. She was really that person that took care of everybody else and literally was a caregiver for a paraplegic. She taught CPR classes. She was in the health space for many, many years, but she was diagnosed a few years before she passed with MS, and she was in a lot of pain. And so she definitely was taking care of everybody else and not herself. And I truly believe that in the long run, she just didn't have anything left for herself. But it was hard. Definitely, she had attempted 6 other times, and it was about 5-year span in between what we knew and when she completed. So yeah, she was definitely the life of the party. She had millions of friends. I mean, she knew like everybody in Colorado. That was just the type of person. She wasn't worried about talking to anybody or had a lot of friends, but also drove me crazy most of the time. And I drove her crazy being the little sister. So we had that dynamic.
And I know, we've talked offline of like the personal work that you've done around this grief and what you're doing to try to turn that pain into purpose. What would you tell listeners that either are struggling with suicidal thoughts or that have a loved one that is struggling?
Yeah, so it definitely was something that I didn't want to let anybody know how she passed originally because of the stigma, right? Like, I didn't want anybody to think any less of her or our family. Because oftentimes we think that when there's a suicide, that there's something wrong with that family. Like, what's going on in that
Right.
person's life or their family that caused them to do this, right? But with suicide, it's I used to, I guess if I go back, like, I used to think it was very selfish. I was like, if anybody that I know committed suicide, I would say, use that word, I would never go to their funeral. That was something I said for a really long time, not understanding anything
Ouch.
about it. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like,
Ouch. That like turned around in your life horribly.
yeah, and I mean, I just didn't understand it. Like, I
Right.
thought it was so selfish, and I was like, why would you do that to people
Mhm.
around you? Like, why would you even consider that? I actually lost a cousin many, many years before my sister to suicide, but I wasn't as close, and I still didn't understand it. She was 16, and it just didn't make sense. So, and I think for me, because my sister had attempted so many times, that I just shut my emotions off. I was like, I have to protect myself, and I can't go through these cycles with her. And
Mhm.
it was just something that I didn't understand. And then as I've gone along on this journey, what I have learned the most is that suicide is not selfish. It's actually the complete opposite. They are thinking that they're helping everybody around them by basically taking themselves out of that situation.
Right.
And or there's a life event that is happening and they don't see any other way out. So a
Yeah.
lot of it is, or most that I have learned about is, there's this pain, there's this trauma, there's this life event or this situation that's happening at that moment, and they just don't see any other option.
Yeah.
And it's much more selfless than selfish.
Right.
And so when we talk about suicide, a lot of times those that have suicidal ideation, they talk about feeling like they're a burden. They talk about feeling like if they were removed from this, then everybody else around them would be better. And that's the conversation that we don't have. And I think it's important.
Well, I want to just start by saying thank you so much for being real and vulnerable to be able to admit some of those negative thoughts and feelings, because I think a lot of people go there. And even, when you talk about your sister was kind of going in this cycle of suicide attempts, and there's a lot of drama around that. As a mental health professional, we sometimes label them borderline personality and we kind of dismiss it as, drama or attention seeking. What would you say to people that are, maybe thinking that about their loved one?
And those were words actually I used. Like, my sister was over dramatic. She was crazy. I didn't understand how the emotions were showing up, right? Like, there was no understanding from my side. And I like to use myself as an example because I only know my experience. Like, I can't say how you're going to experience with somebody else, but I can say is that the words that we use about ourselves and others is really, really important. Yeah. So if we're running around like telling ourselves things that we would never say to a friend, then we need to kind of check that within ourselves. But then if you also have people that are saying to you, oh, you're over dramatic, you're crazy, like you have those words coming at you,
Right.
that starts labeling you as a person too. And then we start to kind of take on this identity. And so if you have those people in your life, like, be really aware of what you're saying, like what you're outwardly putting towards them or even towards yourself, because that's not fair either. So yeah, it's just ask questions.
Well, and this is one of my pet peeves. So if I have any professionals listening, when you label someone borderline personality, you're saying it's their fault and there's nothing that you can do to help them. And that's so not true. And there's often, 99.9% of the time, a biochemical component when you get to suicidality. And so, but I also say, because after losing 2 children, I have, there's really no reason to live. I've been there. And, it can be a thought. It doesn't have to be an action.
Yes.
So that's what I tell people who are struggling with suicidality. It's like, get help from someone who will, be understanding and helpful. But also, I do set boundaries with some of the drama, because there is drama. But it can be a feeling. It doesn't have to be an action. I often say that.
Yeah, it's really that difference of the action, right? So we know, and I know you know, and those that are listening that have been trained in this know that we can move people through that process or those thoughts, right?
Yeah.
They're thoughts for the moment until we set an intention or an action. And so that's kind of where my organization fits, is like, how can we train just everyday humans that are walking around this planet to be able to help each other, because you don't know how much of an impact that you could make as a non-trained person on that person's life, right?
Yeah.
Like, if you know how to just even listen without trying to fix, like, that's huge.
And people are so afraid.
Yes.
And so people are afraid to tell their friends that they feel this way, right? Because they're afraid their friend's going to overreact, call the police. They end up in a 3-day hold.
Yeah.
And the friend is scared because they don't know what to say. So tell us a little bit about the training that you provide. What kind of practical tips do you give people?
So I am trained in mental health first aid, which is a nationally and internationally recognized evidence-based curriculum. That is kind of our entry-level class that we offer. And a lot of that is that general overview. Like, what is mental health, right? Like, mental health is our brain. We all have mental health. Right. But not all of us have mental illnesses or disorders. And there are those disorders. There are those illnesses. But again, it doesn't define you. You don't have to take that on as your identity, but understanding it is important. And then again, the language that we use around mental health, whether we say challenge or we say diagnosis or illness, right? Like, all of those are interchangeable.
Well, and this is why this podcast is called Embrace the Journey, because we are all on a mental health journey, whether we acknowledge it or not, right? And that doesn't mean that we all have a mental illness, but statistics say that 1 in 5 people meet criteria for depression. That is a lot of us, right? And so, and we're all on this journey. And if you add anxiety type things to that is most people, right? So, just kind of getting it out there. The anti-stigma movement has been great at identifying disease process, but not identifying that we're all on this journey and that we actually can help each other. I just finished a book called Connection, and it talks about how the lack of connection is contributing to depression and anxiety, and that the treatment is like connection, not going for professional help, but actually feeling a part of something.
Yeah, and that's like another flip side of kind of what we're doing too, is that community part, right? Like, most of our classes are virtual, so you can join us from anywhere across the US. If you're international, we do have partners that we can connect them into. But that connection part, right? Like, for so long, I was during the nonprofit. So I started it in 2018.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't really know what we were going to do, but we started in the volunteer space. And that was huge. I mean, like we were in the VA hospital, we were in Children's Hospital, we were actually helping another friend with her volunteer things. And that was when I really started seeing like this community.
Mm-hmm.
And then even the community within mental health, it's a huge community, but it's so small at the same time.
Yeah.
And being able to make those connections, that's our other goal, is like, how do we build this community, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like I was like, I want to save the world. And then I was like, I can't save the world until I save my community. So I went really, really big. And then I was like scaling back. And we're still scaling back, but still growing at the same time, because truly that's what it is. It's the connection. And we're understanding that more after the pandemic and noticing what is really, truly happening with, like you said, anxiety and depression. And when we start to be able to have that connection and have the people that lift us up versus break us down, like that's such an important part of our mental health.
Yeah. Yeah. So tell me about your journey of kind of grief, and sounds like, within a year of her passing, you started this not-for-profit. Same thing happened to me. My son died in 2016, and I started Mentally Strong in 2017. We didn't start as a clinic till 2019, but I knew right away that I had to do something with this pain to help others. Tell us about that journey for you.
Yeah, I mean, so 2017 was kind of a blur for me, to be honest. Right. My sister passed. My son actually had seizures on my sister's celebration of life. So 5 days later, that morning, I was actually on the ambulance to Children's, and then I broke free to go to her celebration of life. And then I was just being mom like that whole year. And my coping mechanism was keeping busy, like busy, going, always doing something. My son was only a year and a half, so I felt like that's what I had to do until I hit what I call the virtual wall. And I was like, yeah. And it was the silliest thing, because I worked in a corporate job at the time, and they were moving me from one team to another team, and I lost it. And I had a temporary supervisor at the moment, and he took me in the office and he was like, hey,
so he didn't know that your sister had passed. He didn't know that your son was having seizures.
Yeah. Like didn't know. I mean, he knew a little bit. And he was like deer in headlights, like, oh, she's sitting here crying. What do I do? And then he's like, you know that we have, like, you can take time off, like you can take leave of absence. Like, and I was like, I've been considering that. He's like, it may be a really good idea. Yeah. And I was like, thank you. So I did. I took, at that time, we had 6 weeks that I was able to take. I took the time. I found a counselor we got actually 10 free sessions, which is something a lot of people don't know is like the employee benefits, at least major corporations. I got 10 free sessions. Wasn't like the best counselor for me, but she worked for that moment.
Yeah.
And once I started going back to work, so what really, really helped me was I went to this 3-day event in January of 2017, and it was the community. So it was called The Greatest Year of Your Life. I didn't know half these people existed. One of my friends brought me, and I thought it was going to be motivational and be like, rah, rah, rah. Like, I'm going to be energized and all these things, right? Going into the new year, and I was bawling the whole first day. And it was because I was actually introduced to neuro-linguistic programming, or NLP.
Yep.
And one of the processes we did was called The Day You Were Born. And it took me back to the day I was born. But it was all around my sister.
Right.
And I didn't know, like, I was able to forgive her and forgive myself. Which I was carrying what I now call the shoulda, coulda, woulda, hoodoo, voodoo, we-doos. Those, like, I could have done this. I should have done this, right?
Right.
And so...
Ouch. Like, several times as you're talking, I'm getting goosebumps and a knot in my throat. I think that you have been through a significant journey. And I know there's people listening that don't know how to get on this journey of actual healing. But I think it's just saying yes to whatever you can, searching, who would have thought NLP would have been your breakthrough? It's not, you weren't searching for NLP, right?
No.
You just thought, okay, I know I need something. I'm going to go to this retreat, and wow, NLP changed your life.
Yeah. And that was actually the guiding force. I was like, well, shoot, if that can do that, I need to figure out more. And led me on to going to a retreat that summer where that was where BCC Evolution started popping up into my brain. And I got the challenge of making it happen. And they were the catalyst, these amazing people, again, that were lifting me up, not dragging me down, and that were challenging me to make what I wanted a reality.
Yeah.
And that's where BCC Evolution started. I had no idea what I was doing with a nonprofit, but I knew that it was part of my journey, and it really helped me in the healing process and took me on this incredible journey through NLP of getting my practitioner, my master practitioner, my training and consulting, and currently I'm getting my International Coaching Federation certification.
Good for you.
So yeah, it was huge in my life. I was like, man, if this helped me, like how many other people can this help?
Yeah.
And that's been a huge part of my journey for sure.
Are you practicing as a coach?
I am, yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So I actually can in Colorado once I get my certification, because it's I think, psychotherapist, I believe. I can go get registered in Colorado as a alternative psychotherapist. So
good.
Yeah.
Good.
Excited about that.
So you've done a lot in that healing journey. And a lot of times when we're learning these techniques, we are learning to take care of ourselves. That's why when I teach the mentally strong method, you actually have to do it on yourself. They're like, well, I want to be a coach. I want to help other people. Well,
help yourself first.
Yeah.
Yes.
You got to know how to do it on yourself and know how to be able to think through your problems, organize them, and so that you can make choices in line with what you want and heal. So let's talk about grief. It's going to be big for you next week. You have an anniversary of her death coming. Do you do, something special on that day? Do you do nothing on that day? What does that day, that ritual look like for you?
So I actually, and I know I was telling you before we jumped on here, but we have our gala coming up. And I always, because February was that month that I just wanted to skip through. And luckily it's the shortest month of the year. I was like, right? So in the past, I guess back up a little bit. I actually had an ex who passed from substance use 2 years and a day prior than my sister. So in 2015, he passed from liver failure or kidney failure. A little bit of both, actually. And then 2 years later, my sister passed. So he was on the 15th of February. She was on the 20th. And then my son's seizures were on the 25th of February. So that whole week is like a big week. I was like, I just want to skip February. So I decided with my nonprofit that I'm inserting our gala every single year right around that time. So we come together and celebrate. And that's how, and I've had so many people that are like, you should do a gala in February. And I was like, I don't really care what. I'm like
right, because
the point,
it's not about
it's not really about, it's about bringing awareness to our nonprofit, of course, but it's also bringing a place for people to celebrate the lives of those people they've lost and not want to skip over months, right? And I hear that too often, and I've heard a lot of people that have lost people in February. Interestingly enough, the month of February is a very high rate of suicide. There are other months,
it's a little depressing because of the weather and those kinds of things.
Yeah. And we have, like SAD or seasonal affective disorder, especially in Colorado. And we're just coming out of the holidays, and we have those moments of potentially feeling alone because there's Valentine's Day, right? There's a lot of things happening in the month of February. So it tends to be a higher month for suicides, along with several of the other around that time. So
yeah, absolutely. That's exciting. I am doing my grief documentary premiere on May 5th, which is my son's birthday, and exactly 25 years from when I became a mother, because he was my first child. And, everyone was like, "Are you sure you can do it on that day?" I don't know. I might be a mess, but it's important. The date is important. And like you said, not skipping over those times, but also taking the time that you need as well.
Yeah, I don't, other than that week is actually really, really busy for me this year. I was like, what am I doing? But my mom actually also gave us tickets to a show at the theater for that night. So it's going to be really cool because my sister and I, one of our things was live music and dancing. So I was like, well, yeah, I'll go that night because might as well do something to celebrate and have fun. And I know it can be really, really hard. And I've actually had people in the past tell me that I shouldn't be leaving the house, that I shouldn't be celebrating, that I should be sitting in my basement crying. And the conversation that I have with them is, hey, we all process grief differently. We all experience things differently. Like you from me, me from you. Nobody has the same experience. And I have done a lot of work to get to the place that I am. And I choose to celebrate my sister's life. I choose to find this space that is celebration, not the sadness. Like I don't want to live there anymore. And I'm not, it comes up, right? Like, the wave of grief, it's like a freaking roller coaster.
Yeah, you're like, oh, I'm fine. I got this. Boom.
Bam.
Right.
You're like, I can't even get out of bed. Right?
Well, and it's important, is someone using keeping busy to avoid, or is it a conscious coping? And, it sounds like you have a conscious coping around it. And I do too. But I do have to keep busy. And, turning that pain into purpose, but also taking, a day. I was coming up on the 2-year anniversary of my daughter's death in December, and somehow my day was like full of meetings and things like that. And I didn't realize it till like a week before, because, I'm going on with life. And I just, I had to tell my team, look, I might be okay, but it's probably not fair for me to have to push through that. So let's go ahead and, cancel those things and stuff. And so it's about being insightful and aware of where you are in your grief journey. And if you are staying busy, it's a consciousness, not a trying to stuff.
Oh, yeah.
Because people do that, and that's not healthy.
Yeah. And I know you actually just brought up something too that popped into my head is a lot of people feel like if they are constantly busy or they're just going on with life, that they're going to forget. And I just want to say for anybody, if you are in this grief journey, I promise you'll never forget. It's literally, one of those things that you'll never forget. And although the memories start to slowly fade a little bit, I actually had a friend back in the day who told me that you'll never get over it. You'll never really get through it. You just learn how to grow forward. And that was so impressionable on me that I was like, I love that. Like you just learn how to grow forward without that person, but it never means you'll forget them. And I want to say like in technology today, the coolest part, I guess, of this journey is that like my sister's Facebook is still there, right? I can go back and like listen to things, which it's very interesting to be able to do that, especially now, but it is part of that healing process, right? Like you learn to grow forward, you learn to have life happen. And if you have those moments that you're bawling all day, trust me, that happens to me. And then I have those moments that I can like sit here and talk to you about her till, it's just those moments in life that we ebb and flow and follow the roller coaster.
One of the things that I did for my own healing is I started researching grief theories because I got really frustrated because the whole Kubler-Ross thing just doesn't make sense in intense grief. And so I started researching other grief theories, and a lot of them had that same kind of steps. And I'm like, it's not steps. Let me find something that's not steps.
Yeah.
But there is one called Growing in Grief that it has a visual around it, and like you're in a mason jar, and your grief is this big black ball inside the mason jar, right? But then next year that you could get into a bigger mason jar. Now, this big black ball is still a big black ball, but the mason jar, that what is around it can get bigger, like your life experiences and finding things that bring you joy. I liked that one. There's 2 more, attachment theory and continuing bonds. I think that we don't talk enough about spiritual health because we are in a culture right now of fear of proselytization, fear of, I'm going to try to convert you to what I believe. And so nobody talks about, kind of your spiritual health. And continuing bonds talks about like, eternal souls. And it's not about a specific belief system, but that we, that there is an eternity to our souls and things like that. So those were some of the ones that really touched me as I was going through the researching those grief theories and stuff. So
yeah, that's so interesting too. And I'm of the mind that whatever you believe is perfect for you. And I know when my ex passed, numbers became my thing. But then when my sister passed, it's even more. And I thought I was just like the repeating numbers, like 222, 333, 444, 555, 1010, like all the numbers.
And you see them.
Yes. Yeah. And it was probably a couple years ago that I'm like, it happens so often and regular. So I started taking screenshots on my phone every time. And then I went back and I was like, holy moly, like it happens constantly. And it's different, right? Like when there's different parts of my life, sometimes I don't see them. Sometimes I see them all the time. Some days I see like all day long. And it's not like, I'm not trying to consciously like be aware of them, but it happens. And that's what really like, I actually got a tattoo on my shoulder that is numbers. So there's 2s, 1s, 4s, and 7s. And it was really my husband and I were going to get a tattoo, and he wanted the 4s because it's like forever, or for better, for worse, forever. And then I found the one that had all of them. And I have a lot of tattoos and I didn't have much place to put it. So it went on my shoulder. And what showed up for me after was it's my guides and my spirits taking the weight off my shoulder, which was like, I was like, oh, all right. Like I was like, man, that was good. So whenever I need that reminder, other than looking at my phone with all the screenshots, I think about it here. Like when I get really, really tense, or there's a lot happening, like I start to think about the numbers like on my shoulder, and it's just like, it almost feels like a download of my guides, like being like, you're fine, we got you. So that's pretty cool.
When you went through the process of forgiving your sister, did you feel any connection with her? How did that process go for you?
Yeah, I am also, or in the past, I have been a big skeptic, right? So like when we went, I was like, this is not going to work. Like, what am I doing? Right. And it was just so powerful in that moment. Like, I felt like, there was this connection, like, because I didn't intentionally like mean for it to go directly to her, because it was supposed to be about the day I was born, right? But that's where it shifted to. And I've had moments that like I get these small, what I call the little signs, right? Like the light flickering or something interesting that's happening. And I actually have a grief and loss support group. And we've had conversations about those too, or like these small little signs of them being around. And it's really interesting to think in that way, instead of like you die and then, you're just in a box in the ground or whatever. One thing I did do to celebrate my sister's life, she was cremated, and my mom allowed me to have a part of her ashes. I put them in capsules and I sent them all across the world. So they were like little message in a bottles, and people would take them to different travel places and throw her in the ocean.
Oh,
So
wow. So
yeah,
she is everywhere.
she is everywhere. Yes, yes, yes,
Literally
yeah,
everywhere.
yeah,
Yeah, I
yeah.
have my daughter's ashes here and my son's ashes here.
Oh,
Yeah, so keep them with me and that kind of stuff.
that's
Yeah.
amazing.
Been on a pretty difficult journey, and I'm so excited about what you're doing with your not-for-profit. So tell us how people can get involved and where to find you.
Absolutely. The best place is our website. So it's BCC, so B as in boy, C as in Charlie, evolution.org. BCC, if you think about the blind carbon copy email,
Okay.
that's what I kind of modeled it off of.
Okay, I was going to ask if
Yeah.
it had an acronym. Okay.
Yeah, so I thought about mental health, and you can put a whole bunch of people on the BCC line, but nobody knows who's there. Well, that's how I think about mental health, is it's there, but you may not know it's there. So we're trying to get them from being invisible on that line to the two front, or like in a space that they can actually talk about it.
Okay.
So, and then it kind of evolved. That's why evolution, because we're always evolving. And then I use because Carrie cared. My sister's name was Carrie. So that's where BCC came from. Yeah. But our website is the best place. You can also find me on Make Mental Health Matter. I have a TV show. That's what it's called. So, and that's just giving more resource and information for people. And we're across every single social media you can imagine. So yeah, BCC Evolution across everywhere and anywhere.
Perfect. Anything else you'd like to share with the audience?
I would just say, like, if you are somebody that truly wants to learn how to help others or help yourself, or is in that space that you are struggling and you need resources, reach out to us. Because we can get you connected. Like, you are one of our connections. If I don't know somebody, I can find somebody to connect them. So those are our two demographics, really: the helpers, the ones that want to help, and then the people that are really struggling, and we can connect them to resources. But you don't have to go at this alone. There's so many people in this life that want to help. And so you really, truly are not alone. And we can really make mental health matter all together.
Thank you so much. This has been a very moving, even though we didn't cry, we got there. Almost. Yeah. We kept it together. But definitely, I really appreciate your vulnerability. I think that's so important in this space. We don't do enough of it. So thank you.
Well, thank you for having me on. I appreciate it.